Hi everyone, it's Miss Stansfield with your next English lesson. For this lesson you're going to need your white workbook, so your CGP Key Stage 3 English books, and you're going to need a pen and paper as well, so a notebook or your English book. So our learning objective today is to understand how audience and purpose affect the way text is written. So we've got 4 keywords at the bottom down here: audience and purpose, and informal and formal, which are words that you should be familiar with, hopefully. But by the end of the lesson, you should be able to understand the features of a formal and informal letter, understand why audience and purpose are important when writing a letter, and use different features for different audiences and purposes. Okay. At certain points during the video, I'm going to ask you to pause it and just complete an activity. So do just bear in mind that there will be points where you need to press pause on the YouTube video, and you'll need to check your answers in the back of the white book as well, and I'll give you the page number for that. So, if we think about the definition of today's keywords and why they're important when it comes to writing a letter, we need to just move this on. Think about audience. So who is reading the text? If I say you need to think about your audience, or who is the audience of this text, that's the person who is reading the text, who it is intended for. The purpose is what the reason is for writing text. So for example, is it a letter? Is it an instruction manual? Is it a textbook? What does the person who's writing that text want to achieve from writing it? And then if we're thinking more specifically about letters, informal and formal are going to be really important over the next few lessons, because depending on who you address a letter to, so a letter is the focus of our writing over the next couple of lessons, it depends on whether or not you use a formal style or an informal style. So an informal style is the kind of style that you'd use if you're writing to someone that you know. And a formal style is written in a different style to an informal text. So it uses formal language and it has an official purpose. So what I would probably do, if you've not got these written down already, is I would just jot them down quickly. Okay. So when we think about an audience, a writer always writes with an audience in mind. So this is something that you need to think about as well. If you're writing any kind of text, whether it's a letter or something different, why are you writing that text? And when you think about who you're writing that text to, because if you think about who you're writing that text to, it gives you an idea of the language that you should use, the content, so what you should put into that text, and the presentation, so the way you lay that text out. Okay, so first thing I'd like you to do, probably pause the tape here, is think about the text below and who would the audience be for each of these texts, and how would the language, content and presentation be affected. So we've got 4 different bullet points down here. You've got a travel brochure, you've got a nursery picture book, you've got a Make and Bake magazine, and a GCSE science textbook. So just thinking about the 3 bullet points in blue, who would be the audience, first of all, and how do you think the language, content and presentation might be affected? Okay, so pause the tape, pause the video, and then we'll go through the answers. Okay, so hopefully you've managed to pause the video. So if we think about the first bullet point, travel brochure, your audience there is going to be people who want to go on holiday. So how are you going to make that appealing to the people that you're writing to? Well, you're going to use the language related to holidays. It's going to be descriptive, it's going to be informative about all the great places that you can go, because you're advertising, aren't you? And you'll have probably pictures of the places that you can visit when we think about the presentation, the content. And it might be that you decide to produce your information in bullet points so people can easily see what's available. If you think about a nursery picture book, obviously you're thinking about the age of the people that are reading that. So that would be for small children. So if you're writing for small children, obviously the language is quite simple. The content would be simple as well, so nothing too challenging. And you would probably use large font and a lot of pictures, wouldn't you? Now your third one, Make and Bake magazine, obviously aimed at bakers. So your language there would obviously be more challenging than your nursery picture book, because it would be instructional. So you're instructing someone on how to bake things, how to make things. So it might be language related to baking, like grams and ounces and your ingredients. And you're looking more for explaining and informing people on how to make something. You might use pictures as well, list of ingredients, you might use bullet points again for instructions. And then finally, a GCSE science textbook would be aimed at teenagers, if you think about when you'd be taking GCSEs. And your language there again would be quite specific to science, wouldn't it? So it wouldn't be general, it would be a specialist kind of language that you'd be using. The content would obviously be science. And the presentation, again, you'd probably have a mix of questions, you'd have a mix of pictures, of bullet points, so that teenagers could take that information and use it for their revision, okay? So when we think about the audience of a text, we have to think about how they will view that, how they will look at that, and how they will get the information that they need, okay? So what I'd like to do now is press pause, and I'd like to have a go at page 1 of your white book and question 1, 2, and 3, okay? Okay, so when you've done that, I want you to have a go at checking your answers on page 86. So if you go to 86 of your white book, your answers should be there just to check that you're clear on audience. Now, the next thing we need to think about is purpose. So purpose, as we said before, is the reason for writing a text. So everything you read has a purpose, and the main purposes are to inform. So we tell the reader about the topic and improve their understanding. So have a little think now if you can think of any text that would be informative. To explain, so to show why something happened. So it might be, for example, if we think back to that GCSE science textbook, that would be a text that's there to explain. To advise, to help the reader in some way. To entertain, written to be enjoyable for a reader. And to argue or persuade, so to get the reader to either agree with the point of view or to do something. Now, these will be texts that you are familiar with, and you'll be familiar with the purposes as well, but you might want to jot these down just so that you've got them. Okay, so why is purpose so important? So if we look at the descriptions below, what do you think the purpose of each of these is? I want you to pause the video while you think about this, and just thinking back to these purposes here, which ones would you match to these bullet points? So asking a travel company for money back after a terrible holiday, what's the purpose of that text? An Xbox instruction manual, what's the purpose of that text? A story, and a page in your science book that goes through the stage of the photosynthesis. So what is the purpose of that text as well? Okay, so I'll pause the video and then we'll go through the answers. Okay, so let's check. So asking a travel company for money back after a terrible holiday, you would imagine that that would be to persuade or argue, because you need to convince someone that your holiday wasn't good enough and that they should give you the money back for that, and you'd have to use reasoning for that. An Xbox instruction manual, obviously instructions. A story would be to entertain. And a page in your science book that goes through the stage of photosynthesis, you'd be looking at to explain and possibly to inform as well. Okay, so again, I want you to just quickly pause the tape, and then you're going to look at page 2, question 1 and 2 in your white book. Okay. Okay, so if you can check your answers now on page 86 again, and then we will move on. So the purpose of looking at audience and purpose is because we're looking this week over the next couple of lessons at formal and informal letters. Now, formal and informal letters, as we said before, they differ, even though they're both letters, they differ massively because it changes the way that you would write something depending on who you're writing to. So for example, if you were to write a letter to Mrs. Doward, that would be completely different if you were writing a letter, say, for example, to your sister or to your mum or whoever in your family, okay? So I want you to look at the 2 letters below. Which is the formal one, which is the informal one, and how can you tell? So just looking at these 2 letters here, and again, I'm going to ask you to pause the tape, pause the video. How can you tell which of them is formal and which is informal? Can you pick out the features of each one? Now, obviously, they've both got the features of a letter, but what makes one of them informal? What makes it informal? Okay. So I'm going to give you an opportunity now to pause the video, and then we will just discuss it. Okay, so just pause here, have a look at the 2, and see if you can do the task above. Okay, so if we start with the red one first, the that starts Dear Sir or Madam. Obviously, this is the formal text, this is the formal letter. Because if we look at the opener of the letter and the sign-off of the letter, they both have formal features. So Dear Sir or Madam, if you don't know a person's name, or you might start with Dear Mr. whoever in a formal letter. And then down here at the bottom, obviously if you don't know the person's name, you would sign off yours faithfully, and then with your name, either Mr. something, or as it is here, Miss E. Taylor. Now by comparison, Dear Lucy, so we're just using the informal name. And then down here, mustache, take it easy, speak to you soon. This is quite an informal sign off, it's quite familiar, and then you've just got this person's name and even a kiss there as well. Okay, so the way the letter opens and closes shows whether it's formal or informal. In this one, we've got, I am writing to complain about the poor level of service I recently received at your restaurant. Now, obviously, this makes it very, very clear that this is a letter that's writing to persuade or argue. Okay, so this person is trying to get money back for a meal that they felt wasn't of a good standard. They didn't think it was very good. So in this letter, there's a very clearly stated purpose: to argue and complain and to get that money back. So we've got quite sophisticated formal use of language so that this person is taken seriously. So not only was my pre-booked table not ready for over an hour, the waiter was extremely rude and got my order wrong. Furthermore, upon receiving the correct order, it was completely cold. So we go through the different stages of what went wrong and why this person should get their money back. So we've got this kind of list of reasons here. This is clearly completely unacceptable, and I trust that I will receive a full refund as soon as possible by way of apology for the experience I had. Okay, so again, we've got formal language. Notice how there's no slang in here. It's very serious because it sets the tone for what this person wants to achieve. Remember, we talked about purpose before, out of writing this letter. Okay, so we've got formal use of language, formal opening and closing. Notice how both of them are paragraphed though, and both of them still use standard English. So I talked about not using slang here. Now we've got some informal language in the green box, but there's nothing where the words are shortened, or we've got, say for example, two using the number 2 as a replacement. Regardless of whether it's formal or informal, you still need to use standard English. Okay, so if we look at the green letter, we've got cheers for the letter and present. It's lovely to hear from you. So notice here we've got things like cheers, which is quite informal and friendly. It, so we've got this word shortened here from it is. I'm, so this is shortened. I'm glad you're loving your new school and you've met some cool people. So again, that informal language style, because we're talking to someone that we know, is obviously a friend who's moved. I've not really been up to much, been quite busy with school stuff, and mum's been on my case. So we've got different ways of describing things here. Now, if someone's been on your case, it means they're nagging you, it means that they're moaning at you to do something. But again, it's that informal use of language that shows that we're writing to a person that we know. Okay. Okay, so let's just quickly have a look here. So again, I want you to pause the tape. And you're going to move on to page 58 now to look at task 4, question 1 and 2. So just based on what we've just discussed here, if you can move to page 58, pause the video, move on to question 1 and 2, and then we're going to have a quick look at something else, the next question on that page. Okay. Okay, so hopefully you've paused the video. You can now check your answers on page 105. Now, the next question on page 58, we're just going to have a quick look at together before you complete it. So the question is to read this letter written to a local MP. Now, an MP is a member of parliament, so a politician. Okay, so already that gives you an idea of the style that you should be using. Should it be formal or should it be informal? It says, write it out in full, replacing the informal words and phrases in the extract with more formal ones. Make sure you lay out your writing as you would in a letter. Okay, so it starts off, the pigeons which invaded the church steeple 2 months ago are really annoying. For starters, they squawk all the time so you can't hear yourself think, let alone hear the first sopranos. Plus, we had to put up with bird poo in the choir stalls. It really is too much to bear. Okay. So, first thing we need to think about for this question is, what is the purpose and the audience of this letter? How would I start this kind of letter? Okay, so if we're thinking about the purpose, it's clearly to argue or persuade, because it's asking that politician, that member of parliament, to do something about this pigeon problem. Okay, so that should help you to redraft this letter. Now, I said before, would it be formal or informal? Obviously, this is going to be a formal letter because we're writing to someone who's a politician, so we need to be taken seriously in this sense, and it's not someone that we know. So, first off, we'd probably look at some of the words that are highlighted here. So phrases like "are really annoying" and "for starters" aren't necessarily formal. Okay, so when you're looking at redrafting this letter, have a really careful look at the phrases that are a bit more casual, not necessarily how you would want to address an MP, and think about changing those. Okay, have a think about whether or not the purpose is clear and what you want to achieve as a result of this letter. Now, you might notice that this is quite a short letter. It looks more like an extract from a letter. So when you're redrafting it, think about at the end of the letter, just like with the example on the page before, explaining what you want to be done as a consequence of writing it. All right. So how would you end this type of letter? Okay, so those are some things to start you off. Now, I'm just going to ask you to pause the video again and have a think about completing question 3 on page 58. Okay, so if you can pause the video now and have a go at that. Fab. Okay, so what I would do is have a look at page 105 again and compare yours with the model answer. So remember, you're moving from informal to formal. What have you done in order to change that? And does it kind of match up with how you would expect the letter to look on page 105? Okay, so just to go through informal letters. So an informal letter has a casual, chatty and friendly tone. They're appropriate if it's someone you know well. So, for example, fine to write an informal letter to your friend. If you're going to write a letter to Mrs. Doward, for example, or you're going to write a letter to Boris Johnson, not appropriate to use informal, okay? So you sign off informally, okay? So you might say love, see you soon. You wouldn't sign off yours sincerely, you wouldn't sign off yours faithfully, because obviously those are reserved for formal letters. That's how you would sign off a formal letter. Yours sincerely if you know the person's name, yours faithfully if you don't know the person's name. And you're able to use punctuation like exclamation marks and shortened versions of words like don't instead of do not, or can't instead of cannot. Now, this box on the right-hand side is very important, okay? Regardless of whether or not if it's an informal letter, you still need to use full sentences, okay? And you still need to use standard English. So words like gonna, got to go, shortened to G2G, and any shortened text versions, that is not what you would use, okay? So you need to make sure that it's still standard English. It's just the style that's slightly different, all right? Okay, so finally, you're going to move on to task 5, CGP book, page 59, question 4, 5 and 6, okay, just to look at the informal style. So just pause the video now and have a go at those tasks. And then if you can check your answers on page 105. So, off the basis of that lesson, you should be able to understand the features of a formal and informal letter, understand why audience and purpose are important when writing a letter. So why is it important to know who you're writing to and what the purpose is that you're writing for? And you should be able to use the different features for different audiences and purposes. So next lesson, you're going to be writing a letter with a specific purpose and audience. So you're going to be given an audience, the person that it's directed to, and a reason for writing that letter. So based on what we've just done there, you're going to have to think about how you would lay that letter out, the kind of language that you would use, the way you would phrase certain things, what would be appropriate, what wouldn't be appropriate. So what it might be a really good idea to do now is to go back through the PowerPoint that's in class charts to check that you understand everything that we've gone through. Okay? Right. Thank you. Bye.